For years, the Reiner family stood as one of Hollywood's quiet symbols of stability. While cameras flashed and careers soared, Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle built something far more precious behind closed doors. A home rooted in love, tradition, and the kind of emotional safety many people only dream about. For children grew under that roof. Holidays were sacred. Dinners were shared. Arguments ended in conversation, not silence. To the outside world, nothing about the Reiners suggested fragility. They looked untouchable by darkness. And then December 14th arrived. It didn't knock. It didn't warn. It didn't give mercy. It cut straight through their world like a blade. By the time the sun set that evening, Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner were gone. Their lives ended inside the very home that had once symbolized protection and unity. And as police lights flooded the Brentwood street, the unimaginable became reality. Their own son, Nick Reiner, was named the prime suspect. Hollywood froze. Fans reeled. Friends struggled to understand how a family built on love could collapse into something so horrifying. But what the public didn't know, what wouldn't come out until later, was that the truth behind the tragedy was far more complex, painful, and human than anyone could have imagined. Because long before the crime scene tape, long before the headlines, there had been years of invisible suffering. Rob Reiner wasn't just a legendary filmmaker. To his children, he was a father first. No matter how demanding his schedule became, he centered his life around his family. Tracy, the adopted daughter from his first marriage, and Jake, Nick, and Romy, born to his second wife Michelle, were raised with intention. Rob didn't just provide for them. He showed up. Emotionally. Consistently. Deeply. To Tracy, Rob offered unconditional belonging. Adoption never meant other. It meant chosen. Loved on purpose. Rob sat with her in the evenings, talking about life, careers, fears, and dreams. He listened more than he spoke. When Tracy doubted herself, Rob steadied her with quiet certainty. "You're stronger than you think," he once told her. "And I'll always be here when you forget that." With Jake, Rob bonded through baseball. It wasn't just a sport. It was a ritual passed down from Rob's father, Carl Reiner. Stadiums became sacred ground. Each road trip wasn't about wins or losses, it was about time. About presence. About teaching without lecturing. Jake later said those trips shaped who he became as a man. Romy, the youngest, received the most tenderness. Rob and Michelle made sure she felt emotionally safe. Heard. Protected. She was encouraged to explore creativity, feelings, identity. Rob would hold her face in his hands and say, "Whatever happens in your life, I'm showing up for you. Always." But with Nick, everything was different. From early on, Nick struggled in ways the others didn't. While the rest of the children found rhythm in school, friendships, and creativity, Nick gravitated toward chaos. He was restless. Angry. Emotionally volatile. Rob loved him fiercely, but fear lived inside that love. By the time Nick was a teenager, drugs entered his life. First cocaine. Then heroin. Then addiction took over everything. Rehab became routine. Relapse became inevitable. Homelessness followed. There were over a dozen treatment attempts. Countless disappearances. Terrifying phone calls in the middle of the night. Weeks where Rob and Michelle didn't know if their son was alive. Rob stayed awake waiting. Watching the clock. Blaming himself. Eventually, professionals advised Rob and Michelle to cut him off. No money. No shelter. No safety net. They said boundaries would force Nick to change. Years later, Rob would admit that decision haunted him. "We thought we were doing the right thing," he said. "But maybe what he needed wasn't discipline. Maybe he just needed us." That regret lived inside him. The father-son relationship became a cycle of hope and heartbreak. There were moments of connection. Long silences. Explosive fights. Nick accused his parents of not loving him enough. Rob accused himself of failing his son. Neither knew how to translate pain into healing. Then came Being Charlie in 2015. A semi-autobiographical film co-written by Nick and directed by Rob. It forced them to face each other. Really face each other. They argued. They cried. They listened. For a moment, it felt like progress. But healing isn't linear. Nick's sobriety never held. His anger never fully left. The tension stayed just under the surface. And then came December 13th. At Conan O'Brien's holiday party, Rob arrived with Nick. On the outside, it looked normal. On the inside, it was breaking. Witnesses said Rob raised his voice at Nick. Not just scolding, confronting. Years of frustration poured out in public. Nick snapped back, emotionally raw, wounded, desperate. Guests went silent. Something about the exchange felt final. Rob reportedly said one devastating line. "I can't keep protecting you if this is how you choose to live." And then he walked away. That night, whatever fragile bridge remained between them collapsed. The next day, December 14th, the nightmare became real. Police reports say an argument escalated inside the Reiner home. Nick, emotionally unstable and enraged, grabbed a kitchen knife. Michelle was attacked first. Rob rushed in to stop him. He didn't make it. Romy found them later. She walked into the house expecting normalcy. She found horror. The trauma of that moment will never leave her. Nick fled. He was arrested hours later near USC. He remains in custody, charged with the murders of his parents. Hollywood mourned. But grief wasn't the only thing that followed. Then Tracy Reiner broke the silence. And what she revealed changed everything. She spoke about her father's private writings. His guilt. His regret. His love for Nick that he never knew how to express properly. She found a notebook in Rob's study. Inside it were pages of raw confession. "If you ever thought I didn't love you," Rob wrote, "that's my failure. Not yours." Those words destroyed Tracy. Because they proved something devastating. Rob never stopped loving Nick. He just didn't know how to reach him anymore. And in that space, between love and misunderstanding, everything was lost. Tracy sat in her father's study long after the house had emptied of people, noise, and movement. The room still smelled like Rob's cologne and old paper. His desk lamp remained exactly where he'd left it, tilted just enough to cast a warm glow over the scattered notes and worn notebooks that had once held his thoughts. In her lap rested the brown journal, the one that changed everything. Each page felt heavier than the last, as if the ink itself carried the weight of a man who loved deeply but struggled to speak his love in the ways his son needed. One entry stopped Tracy's breath entirely. Rob had written about fear, the kind no parent ever admits out loud. "I'm terrified that Nick thinks I gave up on him. I didn't. I just didn't know how to stay without making things worse." Those words didn't sound like a famous director. They sounded like a broken father. For years, Rob and Michelle had lived with the silent dread that one phone call would end everything. They loved Nick, but loving someone with addiction meant living in a constant state of alarm. Every boundary they set hurt them too. Every argument replayed in their minds. Every night they went to sleep wondering if their son was safe, breathing, alive. What Tracy realized in that quiet room was devastating. Her parents hadn't failed Nick because they didn't love him. They failed because love alone wasn't enough to fix what addiction had already taken. And then came Romy's voice. When the youngest Reiner finally spoke, her words carried a different kind of weight. She didn't speak like a commentator. She spoke like a daughter who lost both parents in one moment. She suggested something painful but honest, that Nick may have felt. Loved differently. Not unloved, but unevenly understood. Maybe, Romy implied, Nick needed a kind of love we didn't know how to give. That idea haunted everyone. Because it meant the tragedy wasn't just about violence. It was about miscommunication. Emotional isolation. A family that loved each other deeply, but never fully spoke the same language of pain. Romy was the one who found her parents' bodies. That image will never leave her. Trauma like that doesn't fade, it embeds itself into memory, into dreams, into the nervous system. Friends say she barely spoke for days afterward. She just stared, shook, cried in silence. And yet, even in her devastation, she asked for privacy. Not headlines. Not speculation. Not blame. Just space to grieve. Meanwhile, the world wanted answers. People wanted to know how a family built on love could end in bloodshed. But the truth is, tragedy rarely comes from a single moment. It builds quietly. Over years. Through unspoken fears. Through wounds that never close. Nick didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy his family. He woke up carrying years of pain, shame, addiction, and emotional confusion that had never been fully healed. And Rob didn't fail as a father. He loved too much, and still didn't know how to save his son. That's what makes this story unbearable. Not that love was missing, but that love couldn't reach where it needed to go. In the aftermath, Hollywood mourned Rob Reiner, the filmmaker. But his children mourned Rob, the father. The man who sat on the edge of beds during nightmares. The man who drove hours just to watch a baseball game. The man who wrote in private notebooks what he never had the courage to say out loud. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how to love you better." That apology came too late. Nick will now live with that truth forever. And so will the world. Because sometimes the most tragic endings don't come from hate. They come from love that couldn't find its way through pain. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you think about the fragile line between love and loss, let us know in the comments. Do you believe this tragedy could have been prevented? Or was it the inevitable result of years of unhealed pain? Subscribe to the channel for more deep dive stories that go beyond headlines and into the human truth behind fame, family, and heartbreak. Like the video if you want more real, emotional storytelling. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.